You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron, live with Ethan Hristodoulou.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Hristodoulou, and today we dive into picks for week number 2 of the NFL season. Last week, I went 9-7. Not terrible, not great, but we are above 500, which is a better start than I had last year, where I came out of week number 1, 6-10. So I will take 9-7 as a good start in the right direction. Now, this week, we got a lot of interesting matchups. There's already a handful of injuries on some teams, so there's a lot to discuss, a lot to get into. Comment down below. Give me your picks. Do you think I'm making wrong picks? Am I making right picks? What are your thoughts and opinions on it all? But we're going to dive right in with the very first game of the week, looking at the Minnesota Vikings heading into Philadelphia for Thursday Night Football. Coming into this game here, we have the Vikings, who I would say took a shock loss last week to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I don't know how many people thought that the Vikings were going to be losing to Tampa Bay last week. I was definitely not one of them. But ultimately, the Vikings could not get out of their own way. They had 3 turnovers on the afternoon, 2 fumbles and an interception. Coupling that with the fact that now Garrett Bradbury, their center, is scheduled to be out for this game, and Christian Darrisaw is also questionable. A little bit concerned about the state of the Vikings offensive line at the moment. And on top of that, I just feel like whatever the issue was, I don't really know if Tampa Bay really took that game from them. It just felt like the Vikings maybe came in with maybe like looking on to next week type of attitude, knowing they had Philadelphia on the schedule. And if you consider what happened in week 2 of last year against the Eagles, I feel like there's a possibility that they may have just looked just a tad bit past the Buccaneers in that matchup and maybe got that, that punch in the mouth they weren't expecting. As for the Eagles, they're coming out of a game, really tough battle against the New England Patriots. A lot of people not really expecting them to have quite that game, but that was actually kind of where I thought the game was going to be. Patriots defense much improved this year, so I'm not too surprised that they were able to give them fits. And then when you look at some of the injuries coming out of that game defensively for the Eagles, I do have some concerns there. Nakobe Dean, James Bradbury, and Reed Blankenship are all set to be missing this game, and Fletcher Cox is even listed as questionable as well. The Eagles, for this one here, if they want to win this game, they need to sustain drives, control the football, and keep it out of the Vikings' hands, because I don't anticipate that the Vikings are going to have as many turnover issues this week as they did last. I think they're going to be a little bit more prepared for this game here, but it is interesting to see where things are in terms of just what the odds are. Right now, Philadelphia is -6.5, at least at the time of me recording this. Over under set for 49. Minnesota, obviously the underdog in this game here. And I do think I like the Philadelphia Eagles for the win in this one. So I am going to go with the Eagles. Despite some of the injury concerns I have on defense for Philadelphia, I do think talent-wise, the roster, even with those injuries, just the Eagles are a little more full in terms of complete talent, especially on the defensive side of the ball, minus those injuries as well. And if you're talking about missing your center and potentially Christian Darrisaw as well, I feel like that Eagles front 7 might be having a very, very good day against them, against that offensive line, I should say. So I'm going to take the Eagles. I like them 27-24. I think there's going to be a decent amount of offense in here with the injuries on one side and me not really being sold with the Vikings defense completely just yet, although they did look good against a Buccaneers team that was getting opportunity after opportunity as the offense just kind of kept coughing up the ball. But I think I do like the Eagles in this matchup. Again, 27-24 should be a good, close, competitive game between two teams that I consider more on the top side of the NFC. Next game we're looking at here, we have ourselves the Green Bay Packers. This is in the early window of games on Sunday, taking on the Atlanta Falcons. Both teams 1-0 here. Now, I basically came away with one question about the Packers last week, and that was, has Jordan Love arrived, and is he that next great Packers quarterback? Because he looked really good. And I know some people were kind of taking digs at the whole, the Bears defense was just downright terrible, and, he should have had a game like that. Well, yes, he should have. If he's as good as the Packers are hoping he can end up being, that is exactly the type of game he should have. So I don't really think you can knock him for taking advantage of what the Bears were giving him. If you have a quarterback that you've developed and he's trending in the direction you want him to, that's exactly the game he should have. And I think that's a positive more so than just giving it as a negative take towards the Bears defense. I think that you should look at that and go, wow, Jordan Love came out. He had nearly 250 yards, 3 touchdowns versus the Bears, and he looked really, really good. Like he was in control, comfortable the entirety of the game. Defensively, the Packers, they're looking as good as their investments have basically shown. They have gone all in on defense the last few years, especially in the draft with all the conversation that was going on around not getting guys high enough in the draft for Aaron Rodgers. It was clear they were preparing for Jordan Love to take over, and now you have a very strong defense coupled with a younger offense that has a ton of upside, just a lot of youth and inexperience, and we're seeing the fruits of their labor, I guess you could say. Packers looked really good in week number 1, and I'm really excited to see this team going down the road this year. Falcons, very strong defensive performance against a Panthers offense that offensive line seems to still be somewhat of an issue. And on top of that, you have a rookie quarterback and a lot of new pieces over there with just interchanging parts going through the offseason. So it wasn't really surprising to me that the Falcons defense looked as good as it did. I will say that the offense had a few bumps in the road up until late in the game, but overall, I would say a really strong and complete performance from the Atlanta Falcons. Now, the Green Bay Packers, though, a much tougher opponent, and the Packers are actually favored in Atlanta's territory at -1, and I do think I am leaning with that. I really like the idea of the Packers winning this game. I just don't quite know if the Falcons are there yet, and while they did win pretty convincingly against the Panthers, it wasn't until late in the game where things kind of spun out of control for Carolina and they came away with a somewhat solid victory going 24-10, I believe. So I'm not quite sold on the Falcons. I like what I saw in week 1 from them, but the Packers really impressed me, both offensively and defensively, just complete domination of the Bears. So I think the Packers riding hot into Atlanta get the win. I have them winning 21-17. I think this will be another competitive game, though. It should be somewhat close, but I do think that the Packers have a little bit more in the gas tank, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Again, don't get me wrong. Falcons look good last week, but you look at the offense they were playing, and they should have had a good game last week. Next up, we're looking at the Raiders and the Bills playing in Buffalo here. The Raiders coming in 1-0, and they are 1-0 in away games, whereas Buffalo comes in at 0-1 with a big loss to the Jets this past Monday Night Football. This is a must-win, get-right game for Buffalo, especially for Josh Allen. 3 interceptions to Jordan Whitehead last week, and you could clearly see that there were some issues with Josh Allen in that game, mentally or just not, I feel like he was rattled for whatever the reason may be, and he was also just, there's too much reliance on Josh Allen in that offense as well. It felt like the world was on his shoulders, and he was clearly feeling it, trying to make a play happen every single time, and for whatever reason, Jordan Whitehead was the Joker to his Batman, because he was just everywhere that Josh Allen wanted to go. It seemed like Jordan Whitehead was there. Then you look at the Raiders coming off of a not so very pretty win over the Denver Broncos, but a win nonetheless. Offensively, was not really super impressed with what they were doing. I will say that I am a little bit concerned with the Devontae Adams injury stuff that's going on right now, so that'll be something to look at here. But Jacoby Myers looked really good. Josh Jacobs had a solid performance as well, but overall, there wasn't really anything too impressive. I feel like both of these teams, despite one being a winner coming into this game and the other one coming off of a loss, both teams were not very impressive last week, but the Raiders did get the better end of the stick in their game. However, I do think that we're going to get a very heavily motivated Buffalo Bills in this next game here, especially being in front of their home crowd. I really like Buffalo in this one. Now, they have Buffalo at -9, and I'm going to be honest, I really don't think that's too far-fetched. I really don't. It sounds like a lot, but there's a real chance, because I'm not a big believer in Josh McDaniels for the Raiders in this game, or for the Raiders in general, but especially in this game going against Buffalo. I don't really know if the Raiders are going to have it in the tank to be able to hang with the Bills if they get hot early and just catch fire. So I'm gonna go with Buffalo. I have them winning 30-20. Their defense is still really, really good. For the offensive issues that Buffalo had last week, they were no issue on defense. They were able to take advantage of an injured Aaron Rodgers. Zach Wilson came in, and I mean, you could argue that there was I know Zach Wilson had that crazy touchdown to Garrett Wilson, but that was more on Garrett Wilson than anyone else. A little bit concerned with just the Raiders offense and what it's going to be, especially going up against a Buffalo Bills defense that is very, very good and littered with talent all over the field. Not sure it's going to fare too well for them, so I like Buffalo. give them the win, 30-20 in a home crowd, get right game. Josh Allen should have a better performance. Keyword should have, and I hope they rely a little bit more on the run in this game and not just put everything on Josh Allen's shoulders. Next game, we dive into the Baltimore Ravens taking on the Cincinnati Bengals, and this one's in Cincinnati. Now, the Bengals are coming off of a basically punch-in-the-mouth game from the Cleveland Browns, and we also have the Baltimore Ravens coming off of a win, but maybe not quite as dominant as some people were hoping to see them have against a Houston Texans team that is dealing with a new head coach, a lot of new players, new rookie quarterback. Like, there is a lot of new going on in Houston, so people were expecting, I would say, a far larger blowout than what we got out of Baltimore, and there were some moments in that game where the Ravens offense just kind of seemed to be like fumbling around in ways that you wouldn't have expected them to be. However, it is very clear to me that the Bengals need some more time to get in sync and get themselves rolling. This kind of feels like last year, and I feel like that's been brought up a lot as well this week by other people, but I think Burrow and the offense need some more time to settle in. And on top of that, I'm a little bit concerned about the offensive line because they did not really impress me going up against that Cleveland defensive front. So that is something that we're going to have to really keep an eye on during this game, because the Ravens themselves, while you could say what you want about how they were offensively and maybe not quite as explosive as you wanted, although Zay Flowers looked phenomenal, I will say this. Ravens, front seven, 5 sacks. The defense allowed only 3.7 yards per play. I mean, they could eat against this Bengals offensive line if we get the same performance they had last week. One thing I was like kind of concerned about with the Ravens was the amount of turnover they had up on the defensive line, especially when it comes to the pass rush and everything. And it seemed like they were ready to roll, and they were doing an excellent job in their first games as starters. So with that in mind, I really want to go Cincinnati in this game. They're even -3, but I'm going to go underdogs. I'm going to take the Baltimore Ravens on this one here. I like the Ravens 29-20. I think the Bengals maybe look a little bit better offensively in this game, but I am expecting some issues again, and maybe even for the next couple of weeks. I think it's going to take some time for the Bengals to settle in and really get themselves right. The Ravens, I know they didn't have necessarily the greatest game last week, but it kind of feels like right now around the league, defenses might be a little bit more ahead of the offenses at the moment. And I think going into this game here, Baltimore should feel a little bit sharper. The defense, again, should give the Bengals some fits offensively, and you wind up with a Ravens upset victory. I don't really know how much of an upset that is, but Ravens 29-20. I think they win somewhat comfortably as the Bengals just try to find their way to where they're supposed to be offensively. Next game, we dive into the Seattle Seahawks and Detroit Lions. This one's at Ford Field, so Lions having their first home game of the season here. Seahawks taking the road after a home loss last week. Detroit, -5 favorites in this one here, and I think rightfully so. They obviously came out last week shocking the world against the Kansas City Chiefs. Say what you want about the 5 drops the wide receivers had from Kansas City and Kadarius Toney and yada, yada, yada. At the end of the day, they still did enough to get the victory. They took advantage of those mistakes, and they got the win, and that's what matters the most here. So coming out, shocking the world in a big victory, and the defense appears to be much improved over last season. Granted, we only have 1 game of sample size, but I did like what I saw from the Lions defensively during that game. As for the Seattle Seahawks, I don't really know what went right for them, to be completely honest with you. I mean, they basically fell flat on their faces offensively. They couldn't stop a nosebleed on defense. They had 426 total yards allowed, not a single sack. I mean, they could not do anything against a Rams team that a lot of people, myself included, have pretty much written off for this season here. But Matthew Stafford and company came in, and Puka Nacua came in and absolutely decimated their secondary. So, I mean, there is a lot to look at in this game here, and you would expect it to be a closer contest, but I'm leaning fairly heavily on the Detroit Lions in this game because I feel like these two teams are just in 2 completely different places right now. I don't know if we're getting the true Geno Smith, and maybe last year was an aberration. I'm not going to sit here and say that. However, you have to be concerned with the performance of that team from top to bottom on both sides of the ball for the Seattle Seahawks, whereas the Detroit Lions are coming in hot off of a massive victory in front of their home crowd. That place is going to be rocking. CJ Gardner-Johnson's been talking about wearing the ski masks and everything, and he wants everyone to do that. Something tells me that this Lions team is here to compete, and I don't quite know if Seattle's going to be ready for this one. I like the Lions. Give them the win, 27-21, fairly comfortably, 6-point game for them. I like the Lions. Next, we dive into the Los Angeles Chargers and the Tennessee Titans. This one's going to be in Tennessee, so Tennessee Titans having their home opener of the season. Both teams 0-1 in this contest here. The Chargers are -3 favorites, and honestly, I think rightfully so going into this one. The ground game did a lot of the heavy lifting for the Chargers last week, as the Dolphins defensively, at least in the passing game, had a pretty good showing, but it was the ground game. Austin Eckler looked phenomenal last week, and I mean, no surprise there. He is, in my opinion, a top 3 running back in the NFL. And that's a conversation for another day, but that's where I stand on Austin Eckler. And if you think otherwise, go talk to a wall. I'm not having that. If the defense can just stop a nosebleed or even just like have some semblance of ability to do anything to slow down the Titans offensively, this game, in my opinion, really should be the Chargers game to win. You look at what the Titans did last week. Ryan Tannehill had 3 interceptions, and I will give the Saints credit. They have a really good defense, and they have ever since Dennis Allen was their defensive coordinator, and as his tenure has moved on to the head coaching position, he continues to have a really good defense every single year. So I'm not super surprised, but you're also looking at some of the injuries the Titans are dealing with as well. It just feels like that injury bug will not let the Titans go. DeAndre Hopkins is dealing with an ankle injury right now, and on top of that, you also have Amani Hooker, who's in concussion protocol. So, like, you're already starting to deal with the injuries, and that seems to be Tennessee's MO. If things go poorly for Tannehill in this game, I would be very curious to see if we see someone like Malik Willis or Will Levis early in the matchup, just because I don't know. I'm a believer in Ryan Tannehill. At least I was during the early portion of his Titans tenure, but the way kind of last season finished off and the way that game looked this past weekend, I'm starting to think that maybe the wheels are falling off on the Tannehill train. I don't know, but I don't have a lot of hope for them in this matchup here. I like the Chargers getting the win, so Road Warriors here getting a W. I have them winning 28-24. I think the Titans offensively maybe look a little bit better. I think the Chargers defense might not be as good as the Saints, and that's, kind of a guess at the moment. I'm not going to sit here and, die on a hill for that, but I will say that I think that the Titans find a little more offensive success, but the Chargers offense just winds up being a little too much, especially with just like the opportunities they're going to have against a secondary that's injured as well in Tennessee. I think that we maybe see a stronger passing game out of the Chargers. I like them getting the victory. Next matchup, we have ourselves the Chicago Bears taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Buccaneers are the favorites in this matchup at -2.5. The weather for this game, and I think this is going to be a factor, the weather for this game, going to be 87 degrees in Florida, hot and humid as it usually is, and I think that is something to take of note because Florida teams seem to always have an advantage in their home matchups early in the football season, and Chicago being a team all the way from the cold Chicago north, I think that might pose an issue. Something to keep an eye on here, but the Bears coming in off of a shell-shocking loss last week, one that has left the organization just kind of with their jaws on the floor, scratching their head, trying to figure out what the hell happened. And it's been very clear based off of what I've been reading regarding just the internal feeling of the Chicago Bears right now. It seems like they are very shocked at the result that they got last week. Whereas you have the Buccaneers coming in hot off of a massive victory, taking advantage of all the mistakes a Minnesota offense was making. The defense, 3 turnovers forced. You had 2 fumbles and a pick that you were able to recover and take away from that Vikings offense. I'll say this. The Buccaneers, defensively, they're still a good unit. You have Levante David and Devin White leading the way over there, and they're still a strong unit altogether. And I don't think you can really count out what they're going to do defensively. And if Baker Mayfield just plays good, solid, sound football, you have some pretty good skill talent. Offensive line, somewhat of a mystery still at the moment, but it's not like the Buccaneers on paper are a terrible team. And it really just comes down to Baker Mayfield playing clean, sound football. And I think he's able to do that. The world isn't, all the weight of the world isn't on his shoulders in Tampa Bay with the way that roster is set up, because it was a competitive roster for a Super Bowl aspiring team just last season with Tom Brady there. So I do like what the Bucs have going on. The Bears, though, came in with so much hype, and they just kind of fell flat last week. Apparently, that there was the feeling that there wasn't the energy there. Jaquan Brisker was texting Justin Fields saying that the energy needed to be up on the team, yada, yada, yada. I'm a little bit worried about Chicago right now. And I think that's leading me, along with that potential for like near 90 degree and hot and humid weather, to be somewhat of a factor as well. I'm leaning for the Buccaneers on this one here. And, initially my thought was I like the Bears, but, come back, make last week's wrongs right. But I'm feeling the Buccaneers in this game here. And I can't believe I'm predicting them to be 2-0 to start the season. But I like what Tampa Bay did last week. I was really impressed with the game. Again, didn't expect them to win the game, and it was 3 turnovers that helped them get that victory. But that's, take advantage of what you can. I like Tampa Bay, and I have them winning 23-16. I've got a feeling that their defense can give the Bears some problems, and I don't know if the offense is there for the Bears. I hate to say it. I don't know if the offense is there. I'm a little bit worried about them as a team right now. There's a lot up in the air for them at the moment, and it seems like they're all kind of questioning things. We'll see what happens, but a loss here this week for the Bears, and we might see a bit of a tailspin for this team. But give me the Buccaneers, 23-16. Next up, we're looking at KC taking on Jacksonville in Jacksonville, and this is a game I am very excited for. It sucks that this one's at 1 p.m. I can't believe they didn't try to, flex this, or not flex it, but try to push this one into the later afternoon games of this week here. But this is a playoff implication type of matchup. The Chiefs come in 0-1. The Jaguars riding hot off of their win over a division rival Indianapolis Colts. The over-under for this one is set at 51, and I kind of agree with it here. You look at the favorites, it's the Kansas City Chiefs. They're 3.5 road dog Warriors here. Listen, I don't know if Travis Kelce is going to be ready to go or not, but I will say this. I was beyond impressed with the offense that we saw from the Jaguars last week, and obviously the drops were a big concern. I don't think that's going to happen again for Kansas City. If Travis Kelce is in this game, I think it's a very close matchup, and I'm kind of anticipating that he does play, even if it is on like a limited snap count. He's just dealing with a deep bone bruise, and taking the time that he has to recover from it, I think he should be good to go. Obviously, we won't find out till we get closer to Sunday, but I do anticipate he's going to play. Both of these teams' defenses were, I would say, I would probably give the edge to Kansas City, at least at this point so far. They did let the Colts kind of come back and nearly, steal that game, but it came up big when it mattered most. Big interception late to get the Jaguars victory. But the question now is, can the Jaguars get over the hump? And something tells me in Jacksonville, with the Chiefs kind of down in the dumps coming off of a really upsetting loss where just a ton of mistakes were made, I think the Jaguars get this one. Something tells me in my gut, and I'm trying to go with that more this year because I felt like there were games that I got wrong last year and even last week where I didn't just go with my gut feeling and what my mind was telling me. I'm going to take the Jaguars in this one. I think this is their coming out party. Obviously, you have a kind of a tighter game than you probably wanted against the Colts last week, but I believe that they're prepared for this one. This was definitely circled on their calendar after losing to them in the playoffs last year. I think the Jaguars come out at home in front of their home crowd, big victory, 31-28. If you're somebody that likes over-unders, I would not be too shy of the over in this game here because I think that the over is a real possibility. But again, Jaguars taking a W, 31-28. Going to be a tight contest, and I think it comes down to maybe who has the ball last or something along those lines, or whoever just makes that one mistake. And be it we saw so many of them from the Chiefs last year, or last season, or, oh my goodness, last game. I think we're probably going to still see some of that layover from last week, but maybe not quite as much. But I feel like with a team that's probably in their head a little bit regarding the mistakes, we might see another 1 or 2 pop up in this game as well that ultimately gives the Jaguars that opportunity to steal the win. Next up, we're looking at the Colts and the Houston Texans, and I've got to say, this one's definitely a toss-up here. Like I mentioned last week, the Houston Texans are kind of like a team that is a thorn in the side of whoever they're playing. They're not one to just kind of go down without a fight, and like I said, they had a closer than some people anticipated game, and they hung on through the majority of the game until ultimately falling to the Ravens last week. But they're a team that is just pesky, and they're never out of a game. Despite the fact that they've lost a lot more than they've won the last few years, they're always giving better opponents a run for their money because teams just don't expect them to play them as aggressive as they do. And I think DeMeco Ryans is setting a culture similar to that. And that's kind of been like the Texans' MO for the last few years. Now, I will say that I feel like CJ Stroud's probably going through some more growing pains than Anthony Richardson is at the moment. Anthony Richardson had a really fun game last week. Obviously, the late interception costing them the football game. But I will say to this point, I think Anthony Richardson has shined just a little bit more than CJ Stroud has. And defensively, I trust the Colts a lot more than I do the Texans at this moment. So I'm really leaning towards Indianapolis. This game is in Houston, but the Colts are -1 favorites here, and that kind of makes a lot of sense to me. I just think talent-wise, the Colts have more in the tank than the Texans do at the moment. So I am going to go Indianapolis. I think they get the victory here. Tighter contest, 23-19. I don't think they run away with it by any means. It's a tight contest. I don't really expect anyone to get blown out in this matchup. Even if it went flipped the other way and the Texans win, I would probably go Texans 23-19, something along those lines. Tighter contest, one-score game. Both teams, obviously, with rookie quarterbacks. It'll be a fun one to watch, but I don't expect a ton of fireworks in this one. And then diving into the late window now. So we're looking at those 4 o'clock games. We have San Francisco going up against the LA Rams. This one in Los Angeles. Rams coming off of a shocking victory. I don't think one that a lot of people anticipated seeing over the Seattle Seahawks. And then the San Francisco 49ers absolutely decimating the Pittsburgh Steelers. That was a game that I thought was going to be a tight defensive contest where offenses were struggling, but the 49ers appear to be firing on all cylinders. Just on pure talent and roster alone, this game is San Francisco 49ers all day long. San Francisco is the -8 favorites, and they're road dogs. Or not road dogs, they are the road team. So I would not be surprised to see the 49ers run away with this game. But it's very clear with Matthew Stafford under center, Aaron Donald's healthy and he's playing. This team is at least a little bit better than people were anticipating coming into the season, and that's good. You have a leader on both sides of the ball, might not be as talented as they were a couple of years ago when they were making a run to their Super Bowl victory, but I will say that I have a really hard time buying the amount of youth and inexperience playing, especially on the defensive side of the ball for the Rams, that they're able to overcome this 49ers team. If I might be putting my foot in my mouth with this one here, but I would not be too surprised to see the 49ers run to a comfortable victory. I have them winning 31-20. For as good as the Rams have looked to this point, and it's only one game, not a large sample size, I really think that last week was more just the Seahawks maybe not quite being where they need to be and not expecting the Rams to be as competitive as they were. Whereas in this game, you've got a San Francisco 49ers team that is on like an absolute tear to get back to the NFC Championship because they want to get to the Super Bowl. Brock Purdy seems to be the guy. I know a lot of people were questioning that, and he looked phenomenal against what is supposed to be a great Steelers defense. Give me the 49ers, 31-20, big victory over their division rivals. Next, we look at the New York Giants heading into Arizona to take on the Cardinals. Both teams 0-1, the Cardinals losing a tight one to the Commanders, and the Giants getting demolished on Sunday Night Football against the Dallas Cowboys. The Giants are -5.5 favorites here, and I don't really think that's too crazy. The line started at -4, interestingly enough. It opened up there, but now it's at -5.5. I do like the Giants in this game here, and there was not really a ton to be super impressed with regarding the Arizona Cardinals last week, other than them getting 6 sacks on the Commanders. I've got to say that the defensive front, I don't know if that was just maybe they're shockingly better than people are anticipating them to be, or the offensive line of the Commanders is just an absolute mess. I don't know what the answer to that question is. That'll obviously be answered in the next few weeks. But that was like the one bright spot that we got from Arizona last week that was able to keep them in the game a lot longer than they probably should have been. The Giants, I know they got completely blown out on Sunday Night Football, but they were a playoff team last year, and I have a really, really hard time believing that this team has just fallen off a cliff like that after an offseason where they at least got some improvements in terms of pieces added to the team, and part of me just can't believe that they're going to completely nosedive. And this is like a get-right game. You lose like that, you come in the next week very motivated to show everyone that was a mistake and that's not going to happen again. So I'm going to take the Giants on the road. I have them winning 20-10. I think that they can handle the Cardinals a little bit better than the Commanders did. I wouldn't be surprised if it's not the prettiest game here, because maybe some of the issues we saw against the Cowboys creep up again this week against the Cardinals. But I do think the Giants get the win here. Get right game for them. I would be shocked if Arizona comes away with the victory in this one here. But 21-10, give me the Giants. I think they have a somewhat comfortable victory and a good bounce back, and a much needed bounce back game at that. Next, we dive into the Jets and the Dallas Cowboys. And man, on paper, would this game have been really fun to talk about had Aaron Rodgers not gone down with an injury in the fourth play of his Jets career. But here we are as Zach Wilson gets ready to lead the team that he thought he probably wasn't going to lead for another 2 years or so. A couple of things for the Cowboys. Dak Prescott, if he wants to help this Cowboys team win this game, I think he needs to throw more than 143 yards in this one here. For as awesome as it was to watch the Cowboys do their thing, both defensively and on special teams last week, offense was not necessarily super impressive. Tony Pollard looked really good, but Dak's going to need to be able to put a little bit more of the weight on his shoulders, especially against this Jets defense that is clearly a very good unit. They gave a Buffalo Bills team that a lot of people like as a Super Bowl favorite a massive problem last week. Force Wilson into making mistakes, bottle up the run game. Breece Hall had 127 yards last week, 2 massive runs, and you're obviously dealing with Dalvin Cook paired with him as well. If you can do all that, I don't really see why this defense in Dallas can't have their way again, but I would like to see a little bit more from Dak Prescott in the offense. As for the Jets, I think I just have 2 real big questions. Can Zach Wilson handle potentially that Cowboys defense we saw last week? Because if that's how good they are, I don't know if Zach Wilson's ready for that. And 2, can the Jets' offensive line specifically stand up to that front 7 of the Dallas Cowboys? I don't know if that can be done as well. So I have some serious concerns as to how this Jets team is going to fare without Aaron Rodgers against a defense that I feel like you really need to have one of those elite quarterbacks to be successful against. And I'm a little bit worried about the outcome of this one. I have the Cowboys 26-13. Don't really think it's super close. I mean, the spread's sitting at -9 right now. Over-under sitting at 38.5. I don't think it's going to be a super high-scoring game. I do kind of like the over because I think 38.5 is a little bit low for the potential of the Cowboys putting a bunch of points up again. But I like the Cowboys. Next, we look at the Washington Commanders and the Denver Broncos. This is probably my least favorite game of the week. I'm not really looking forward to having to watch this one, but I will be. For the Broncos, defense should be able to give Sam Howell some issues, especially like I had mentioned. That offensive line did not look good against Arizona for the Commanders. 6 sacks allowed against an Arizona front 7 that I don't think anyone really has I don't think anyone really thinks is some sort of elite grouping. So I'm a little bit concerned about the Commanders' O-line, especially going up against a Denver Broncos defense that is a really good unit from front to back. They're littered with really, really good players. Offensively for the Broncos, though, the issues from last year seem to have pretty much rolled over. I'm hoping that Sean Payton can correct this all, but at this point, you have to wonder if the issue really is just Russell Wilson and maybe he has just fallen off as a quarterback. And I say that with the utmost respect for what he's done in his career. But I think at this point, that question has to be legitimate. If you're going from the struggles he was having at the end of Seattle to the struggle he had last year to now, last week didn't really look that great as well. I mean, I'd say he looked fine at best. And then as for the Commanders, I mean, Sam Howell had a decent outing. Brian Robinson is a solid running back for the team. It's just that offensive line. I don't really know if they're not able to hold up against Denver, if they really have a chance in this one. But their defense, though, a really good unit, could give this Broncos offense that is basically struggling themselves some fits. I don't expect this game to be very high scoring. Over-under is set at 39, and I think it could be even lower than that. I have the Broncos winning 17-10, not 27-10. I don't know if they could find 27 points if you threw it right in front of their face, but 17-10. I think the Broncos do get a pretty ugly victory. This is probably the least entertaining game of the weekend here, but Denver gets a home win. You have to remember Colorado also, they have a bit of an interesting home field advantage with the thinner air. Teams not used to it coming in, always a little bit harder. I just don't quite know if the Commanders offensively are going to be able to handle the Broncos defense. Now, diving into Sunday Night Football here, we have the Miami Dolphins taking on the New England Patriots. Now, a few days ago, I was feeling pretty good about this game being fairly competitive, but with the injury report in the way it looks right now for New England, something tells me there's a possibility the Dolphins may run away with this game. Miami's -3 favorites on the road, and I will say this. Offensively, Patriots look better than they did last year already, out of the gate. Mac Jones, 300-plus yards, 3 touchdowns, fantastic. The team's offensive line, though, is literally falling apart at the seams. I'm pretty sure every single starter is currently on the injury report right now, either listed as questionable or out for this week's game. And if they're starting an entire group of backup offensive linemen, this game's going to be a disaster, plain and simple. You're going to have to throw nothing but just like quick passes and get the ball out as fast as possible and pray that you can handle the run defense of the Miami Dolphins enough that you can maybe ground and pound your way to victory if that's possible. You're going to really need to rely on your defense in this game here, because that is the only real hope I think the Patriots have of winning, is just completely dominating on defense and shutting down a Miami offense that Tua threw for 466 yards and 3 touchdowns in last week, and a running back core that, while they might not necessarily have like a star lead running back, is a really good group of guys that you can plug each and every single one of them in, and they can be effective in that ground game that Ryan McDaniel has over there. Or Mike McDaniel, excuse me. I keep calling him that, Mike McDaniel. But I'm going to go with the Dolphins in this one here. I'm really concerned about the offensive line issues of New England right now, and while I do think the defense could be a big factor in this game, the New England Patriots defense, I should say, something tells me that the offense is going to struggle behind a group of backup offensive linemen and an offensive line that I don't think is very deep past their starters. Give me the Dolphins. I have them winning 30-20. I think that Belichick could devise a good game plan with Bill O'Brien to just, get the ball out quick, and, maybe they get a touchdown or 2, maybe have to settle for a couple field goals. But something tells me the Dolphins, if the Patriots are making mistakes or struggling to move the ball, have a real good opportunity to drop another 30 points or so this week. So keep an eye on that one. And then diving into the Monday Night Football doubleheader. Not really sure how I feel about this, because I really don't like Monday Night Football games. So the fact that we're getting 2 at the same time, not really a big fan of it. But here we are. The Saints and the Panthers going head-to-head in Carolina here. This one I really don't have a ton to say, because the way I look at this, the Saints offense clearly still working out some of the kinks, but they have a load of talent there. Once they get it figured out, this unit is going to be a problem. The Panthers, offensively, rookie quarterback, decent amount of changes as far as the skill talent goes on that team, and offensive line not quite where it needs to be yet. They've got some work to do, and they're going up against a Saints defense that has been great. Not good, but great under Dennis Allen since he was a DC all the way to now being a head coach for the last couple of years. I kind of feel like this is one that the Saints are coming in. They're -3 favorites on the road. Saints come in, road warriors. They get the win, and I think they win pretty comfortably. I have them winning 27-16. I honestly don't think this game ends up being that close. I think that for as talented as Bryce Young is, it's going to take the Panthers a little bit to kind of get themselves together and actually give us the offense that I think they expect to have with Bryce Young under center. So right now, I'll take the Saints defense that has been consistently great for the last 3 or 4 years now at minimum, and an offense that just has a lot more talent on it than I would say the Panthers do. 27-16, give me the Saints. And then we have the second Monday Night Football game. This one starts at 8:15 p.m. Eastern time. First one at 7:15, so an hour difference between the games. Browns heading into Pittsburgh. They are -2 favorites on this one here. Defense made it a point last week on Cleveland to let everyone know that they have arrived and that they are a unit that you need to fear. And I definitely respect what they have put together over there on Cleveland's defensive side of the ball. However, offensively, I still just don't know about Deshaun Watson. I got some flack from people saying that it was a rainy game, yada, yada, yada. Well, I don't think Deshaun Watson's thrown for over 250 yards since he started a game for the Cleveland Browns. And I would have to go back and double check that, but that might even be a high number. I am really, really concerned about Deshaun Watson and his play at this point. Thankfully, you have Nick Chubb and a litany of skill talent at wide receiver that it kind of mitigates the issues that Deshaun Watson seems to be having at the moment, trying to find himself again as the quarterback he used to be. But as long as the defense can continue to play as strong as they have so far this season, and if they can just protect the football and offense, I think that the Browns are a competitive team in the AFC. I don't know how far that's going to take them in a passing-heavy league, but I do think they can be competitive. As for the Steelers, my biggest concern for them really is just the offensive line holding up against the Browns' front seven. I really don't know if they're up for the task, especially the way the game last week against the 49ers went. Pickett obviously having a hard time dealing with an elite defense in the San Francisco 49ers, and I don't know if I'm ready to say the Browns defense is elite, but they held Joe Burrow to one of the worst starts of a quarterback in NFL history in week 1, so that is definitely something to look at, but clearly struggling against San Francisco's defense. I think that they might find some of those same struggles again this week as well against a very good Cleveland Browns defense. And I'm very curious to see if the Steelers defense decides to show up this week, because it seemed like it was the TJ Watt show and that was about it last week. So if the Steelers can put a more complete effort together, this game could be a little bit more competitive, but I do think that the Browns come away with the victory in this one here. The Steelers are another team that just got absolutely socked in the mouth last week, and I feel like we're brought back down to earth. I've seen a lot of Steelers fans unhappy with the game plan and just the coaching staff over there. A lot of people calling out Mike Tomlin for just having his buddies as his coaches as opposed to people that should be in those positions. Matt Canada's name has been thrown around all over the place by Pittsburgh fandom this week. So there is a lot going on with Pittsburgh. I think Cleveland, though, in a little bit of a better spot right now, coming off of a really big victory over the Cincinnati Bengals. I like the Browns with the win, 24-17. Give them the W, and that wraps up my picks for week number 2 of the NFL season. A lot of interesting games. Hoping to go better than 9-7 this week. I would like to see some double-digit victory predictions, but overall, good start to the season. Let me know your picks. Let me know your thoughts on my picks. Let me know what you're betting on. I would love to hear all that in the comment section down below, but that is it for me. I appreciate you if you made it to the end of the video. I will see you all next time. Have a good one.